African Americans or the general vote. It's not African Americans. It's the voting of people, period. As a matter of fact, I think somebody said that only 6% of the voting population vote. And that sounds like it's insane to me. Had somebody raised that question, I would have said at least 60 or 70%. But 6%, that's only 6 out of 100 voters? Talk about it.
And it should be alarming. So let's look at this from an historical perspective. It's been about 5 generations now since we've had suffrage rights for African Americans. 1870, actually 1865, when President Lincoln, for his assassination, was pushing for the place of African Americans as free individuals with the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. Frederick Douglass pressed him and said, you cannot set them free without giving them the quintessential right of a citizen, and that's the right to vote. And by 1870, I think it was February, the 15th Amendment was enacted as a part of the Constitution, which gave black men at that time, black women still were not allowed to vote, black men the right to vote. 7 men, black men, Negroes at that time they were called, went to the United States Congress. And they were there until about 1929, I believe it was, when they began to dwindle in terms of African American representation in Congress. And it was a long period of time before you had any more. Interestingly enough, it was the Republican Party that African Americans first embraced in terms of casting their vote. Frederick Douglass became a runner with the Liberty Party of that time, and he was actually ran as on a vice presidential ticket. I say that to say that I think for African Americans then, or Negroes as they were called aptly, the focus was not about a particular love for a particular party, but for the party that was supporting their freedom, their liberation, their opportunity to be a part of the American way of life. And that continued until about 1937, I believe it was, when Roosevelt brought the New Deal on, 35 when he brought the New Deal on. And that appealed to African American voters. And many of them supported him. And subsequently they supported Truman. And he won 47% of the African American vote in 1947, you know. And as it moved forward, African Americans have been a part of the Democratic platform from then to now. Over the years, many of them, certain movements in the 60s and what have you, the Voters' Rights Act, it was supposed to try to do what the 15th Amendment was not doing very well. Right?
Give black folk, bring black folks out in political participation.
Extend them the opportunity to actually be a viable part of America through the right to vote. Now, a lot of people say, even to me as a minister, why would you be interested in politics? Well, the truth of the matter is, Black's Law Dictionary defines citizenship as being a member of a political community. So if you live in the United States of America and you're a citizen, if you're going to be heard, if you're going to be respected, if you're going to be a part, you must avail your rights as a citizen, and voting is a quintessential right to express that. I don't know, Dr. Haney, that the education and awareness around that is provided very well, particularly for the whole. And I'm not speaking of everybody, but for the whole of African Americans. We're talking about the old and the young. I mentioned 5 generations now, 2015. We still find ourselves questionably left out of the political process by and large. And largely because certain generations did not pass down the essence and the importance of using that, being aware. I think it's important to have voter registration, absolutely. And we saw that during the 60s with SNCC and groups like that. But it's equally important to have voter education and organization, because that's what they had as well. We've lost that. Now, when President Obama came along, of course, riding under the Democratic ticket, great things in the party, African Americans saw my mother, my mother-in-law, my dad, and others in a certain generations, they saw a grand opportunity to put an African American in the White House. And we seized that. That happened. But if we're intellectually honest, there are many people now who voted then who have been disappointed to realize that there's economically in many ways for African Americans, educationally, for African Americans, socially, and even politically, nothing has changed. But it wasn't on President Obama alone. If there was appropriate education and organization, specifically on the African American subgroup, I believe we could have sustained that bump greater. And today what we're seeing is this apathy that comes from being disappointed.
And so in a real sense, there has to be much more activity in terms of organizing and educating African Americans for political participation, excuse me, regardless of who might be running for an office, which is to say that not to simply go out and vote for anybody, but to be aware of participation and to understand that if you don't participate, then you can't say too much about those individuals who have been elected.
You can, but you won't be taken very seriously. Now, when you speak, now we've seen other subgroups, such as the LGBT group and Hispanic group, they have brought themselves together and established a well-defined agenda. And they put that on the table for political candidates vying for their vote. It's clear where they stand. There's no ambiguity whatsoever about it. If the African American subgroup, who's long been here, and there was a time where it was illegal for a Negro to vote, black man, a colored man, or African American, vote could go to jail and be killed for doing so, teaching them and so forth and so on. In fact, Frederick Douglass was quoted as saying that I didn't know I was a slave until I learned I couldn't do what I wanted to. Which is amazing today. And there are a lot of young people, nobody's physically enslaving them. It's a mental slavery because of a lack of knowledge and
so they need to be educated. There need to be more education in reference, more kind of discussions as the discussions that we're having now in reference to dealing with that. And so we're going to take this second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Is that what it is?
That's 30. This is 3. That's a single 3 is 3.
That's when you give me 30 seconds. That's 30 seconds, not 3 minutes. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, well, we'll have to capture it next time around. How many we got out about 20 seconds too early or what?
I mean, they just added it, but I didn't know if that's what you wanted to do.
That's what I want you to do, but I didn't.
No, not what I'm doing. What you doing? I'm doing what you asked me to do. You just didn't take my cue that time.
I didn't tell you. Sure didn't. I didn't. I thought you had given me a 3-minute cue earlier. Yeah. And yeah. Well, I was still keeping up with that 3 minutes. Yeah. You got to wind. So
that's what I'm saying when I rap, that's what that means.
That's wrapping it up. Wrapping it up.
You see this, that means you got time. Anytime you see a hand not doing this, that means you got some
time. But I don't know how much time I have.
30. All right, let's go through it.
Oh, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
30. Rap.
After 30 years.
It's been a while. Well.
Yeah, that's okay. That's I got it.
You good to go?
Yeah, I'm good to go. I'm good to go. And so now we got about 10 minutes for this last segment, right?
Yeah, this is the longest.
This is the longest segment, okay. And I got out of those about 20 seconds too early. Is that right?
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, 20. Yeah, good. That's good. I Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Pastor RDockery, and he's giving us some information in reference to the political participation of Africans in the political process. And of course, Reverend Dockery, let's see if we can pick up where we left off in terms of African American participation and any other information that you might have in reference to how we might be able to make people much more aware and whatever we might be able to do. Let's see if we might be able to do it from that perspective.
Well, see, so there's this perception. And, you know, people's realities are based on their perception. of what's real in their experience, that voting is not for us. Who is us? Black people, African Americans. When Jesse Jackson ran for president in 1984, 85 I believe it was, a lot of people questioned his viability as a candidate and his sincerity and things of that nature. But I think it opened up the perspective or the possibility, the chance, which may in many ways have laid the groundwork for President Obama.
In other words, had not there been a Jesse Jackson, there probably could not have been a Barack Obama.
Quite possibly. I think there's an argument that can be made there. There's room for argument there. But then you have to consider that Shirley Chisholm, back in 1972, many would like to discredit her efforts, but it opened the door to thought to that possibility. The question was how organized and how prepared were the people that would benefit from such a bump to sustain that. And so what we saw from 85 up until about 2007 is there was some gap there. And so with the right marketing and the right pitch, a young, handsome, articulate young man that represent hope not only for African Americans, for many older whites who would like to see America improve and do better. Here he came. There was this misunderstanding, though, this displaced thinking that he could do it all by himself at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
You know, Reverend Dockery, let's also look at this from another perspective too.
Okay.
When we think in terms of what the various state legislatures are doing throughout the nation in terms of trying to minimize the participation of African American voters, and et cetera, and et cetera. Now, it seems to me that since this is going on, and I think this is well known. I mean, everybody will talk about this. But it seems to me that if this is what is happening, that ought to be an extra encouragement or incentive for those individuals who have not registered. If you know that somebody is trying to intentionally keep you from participating in the political process, it seems to me that that would be the greatest of encouragement to send you out to register to vote, to know that the state legislature and members of the various parties and et cetera are trying to pass legislation that will keep you at home, period.
That's a great point you're making.
Then why does not that?
Right, so that's a great point you're making. So again, if you understood that the legislature is appointed by the people through the electoral process, not only on the state level, but on the local level as well, you have to, those people have to be voted in. And if you're not at the polls, your voice is not represented. In fact, your place as a citizen has been overlooked. Some of it you can argue is somebody else's fault, but I would argue that most of it is your fault. But not knowing does not excuse the reality that certain things are going to exist and take place. A lot of times when decisions are made because we're in the wrong, we are talking about African American people by and large, in the wrong place, those decisions go and they're made without our input. So what we have to do as religious organizations, the church has historically been the place that African Americans have looked to for that guidance. I think there's some room to improve on that, to go back and bring that back, you know, particularly for young people. 18 years old was between 18 and 25, that was the average age of voters that really represented that 97% African American vote for President Obama. Right? 18 to 25, 18 to 25.
Very, very young participation.
And interestingly enough, when you look at the polling data, that's where the dip is.
And it's young people for the most part who are no longer who stopped participating. And not only is that true in reference to this election, but it's true in reference to many of the elections prior to President Obama. And
we have an election here in Davidson County coming up on August the 6th. The question is, and it's expected that 6% that national projection, it's expected that that's going to hold true again. So you're going to be looking at a new mayor and practically new council. What is it that you need to know? You need to search the candidates out, look at their websites, go to forums and set up forums if there are none, and insist that they answer your questions for you. If they take the notion that you're not you know, I don't need to be there and I don't want to be there or I can't be there. What they're telling you is what they would do if they got in office, and that is to overlook your interests.
And so Africans and all those other individuals who might wish to see a different political arena might be able to affect that if they got out and participated in the political process.
And let me say this, Doc, briefly. It's important to understand that we're always going to be the minority population unless some huge change. But and this is the lesson that the Hispanics learn. It's okay if the dominant group controls 90% of the agenda politically. But as long as my 10% is representative of 100% of what I need, I'll do all right. And that's where we fall short. We're not organized, we're not educated to the point where we identify educationally, socially, politically, what it is that we need and what it is that we demand from the government that represents us. We're a republic form of government, which means it's government by the people, for the people, and no other way.
Well, do you think that it might be in the best interest of politicians to educate their voters? Because if you want somebody to come out and participate and vote for you,
unless you're expecting certain people to vote and certain people not to vote, and that's how you oftentimes politicians skew numbers. Okay, so you have to really ask yourself about. I think it's important for you to look for not a politician, but an advocate for the people. An advocate for the people has only one thing in common with a politician. They're looking for the numbers. But the advocate is looking to serve the numbers, whereas the politician is looking to get numbers to serve their own interests. And I would think that anyone running should take that mantra on, that I'm not there to serve my own political interests, as opposed to serving the interests of the people.
Now, and so the election that is fast approaching,
yes, sir,
it will be in August.
That's correct.
Is that the
general election?
That's the general election
for Davidson County,
for mayors, for council,
that's correct,
and everybody else.
Vice mayor, council at large, and the mayor's race.
And so, if a person wishes to participate in this election, they have to be registered in order to vote.
That's
See,
right.
it's one thing to talk about people voting.
That's right.
And people might want to vote when it comes time to vote.
Right. So here's some important dates. July the 7th is the last date you can register if you're not. If you're inactive, it's the last date you can become active again. So you need to do that right away. Go to the Election Commission, Davis County Election Commission, and there's a tab you can check to see if you're actually in order. If you move from your address within the last 6 months or so, you need to update your address and things of those natures. You need to make sure that you're eligible to vote, though, before July the 7th. July 17th, early voting starts. So you can go to Howard Office Building from that point until the 22nd, I believe it is, and early vote only there. Then 11 other sites open up based on where your councilmatic district is, and you'll be able to vote for your council person, 5 people council at large, and for the vice mayor and for the mayor in the mayor's race.
And so all of the instruction has already been given in terms of what you have to do.
Right.
And now the only thing that is important is that each individual can recognize that if he or she is old enough.
That's right. 18
years of age.
Or will be turning 18 by the time of election.
And all they have to do is to make sure that they are registered to vote.
Because and bring your ID. A valid ID would be a driver's license. And I think they took out the student ID thing. But if you don't have a driver's license and you can't afford it, I can't see why that is, but if you can't, you can go and get one.
And of course, let me thank you, and let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.